So, going to Greg Palast, his website, he says the New York voting fiasco was just the warm-up. And if anybody knows about election theft, not just in the United States, but all over the planet, it's Greg Palast. He says, buckle up, America. The voting demolition derby that was the New York primary on Tuesday was merely the crash test for the coming voting wreckage in November, a carefully planned pileup. First, live from New York, Francesca Rheannon, whom you may know as the host of Writer's Voice Radio, did the civic thing by volunteering to work at the polls in a town east of New York City. She said, I just got off my 17-hour shift as an election official. In my election district, she says, out of 166 Democratic voters, 39 were forced to file affidavit ballots. The last election I worked, is exactly one voter needed an affidavit ballot, end quote. That's nearly 1 out of 4 voters. Why? Well, their names had gone missing from the voter rolls. An affidavit ballot, which is called a provisional ballot in most other states, is a kind of placebo ballot. You get to pretend to vote, but the chance it will actually be counted is, well, good luck. If your name is wrongly removed, kiss your vote, affidavit or not, goodbye. Rhiannon's experience was hardly unique. In Brooklyn alone, over 125,000 names were quietly scrubbed from the voter rolls in the 5 months leading up to last night's primary. To put it in perspective, the number of voters purged equals about half of the number who got to vote. Neil Rosenstein, the lead voting rights attorney for the New York Public Interest Research Group, which plans legal action, notes that part of the problem is that partisan hacks sit on the elections board in New York, hacks from both parties. Brooklyn is under the control of the Kings County Democratic Party, one of the last big city machines. Would they attack their opponents' voter registrations? I don't have to guess. In my wasted younger days, I was in the Brooklyn County Elections Office with the hacks, where we were assigned by the party to challenge voter signatures en masse. I wouldn't do it and nearly lost my state job. Am I saying the machine fixed the election for Hillary Clinton? Without further investigation, it would be irresponsible for me to pronounce judgment. Some of the purged may have moved. Some may have died. But those who waited in line only to fill out affidavit ballots are unlikely to be deceased. If the machine had been aware of the mass purge underway, would they have stopped it? As they say in Brooklyn, forget about it. But whether party hacks shoplifted New York or not, that's small potatoes. Scrubbing voter rolls is not a New York value. It's a nationwide epidemic, a disease eating away at the heart of our democracy. Voting officials learned a lesson from Katherine Harris, the Florida Secretary of State, who purged black voters in 2000. They learned how to repeat the purge, expand it, and carefully hide it. I've been traveling the nation from Ohio to Georgia to Arizona and back and finding the voter roll purging machinery running at full speed. Nationwide, state voting chiefs are, from my long experience, the most violently partisan officials you'll ever encounter. From the data provided by the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission, we can calculate that no less than 491,952 voters were wrongly removed from the rolls in 2008, the last reviewed presidential election, in addition to 2,383,587 voters filled out registration forms that were simply never added to voter rolls, and 767,023 provisional and affidavit ballots were not counted. And it's not just anyone's ballot. I'll never forget that. At one of my recent talks on vote suppression, I asked how many people in the audience had ever been shunted to a provisional ballot. There were only 2 black people in the audience. They were the only two to raise their hand. The U.S. Civil Rights Commission statistics tell the story. The chance of a ballot spoiled, which means not counted for one reason or another, is 900% higher if you're black than if you're white. As Rosenstein says, instead of purging voters, we should be enfranchising them. Sure, though we thought that was settled by the Civil War. Okay, we didn't know about the New York purge beforehand, but I'm telling you this now. My team is uncovering an unjustified ethnic cleansing of voter rolls from Ohio to Florida to Texas. This year I was in Selma, Alabama with Hank Sanders, an African-American who joined Martin Luther King on the March to Montgomery that won the Voting Rights Act. Today he's State Senator Hank Sanders, a title that is a tribute to America's advance on voting rights. He's also Hank Sanders' purged voter, forced to vote provisionally this year, even though he's a state senator. Why? Well, I'm investigating, but the state officials, and let's tell it like it is, it's mostly Republican officials, have used so many spurious grounds to cancel registration that it's not easy to pinpoint which one is responsible for the lynching by laptop. It's worth noting that Brooklyn, like Alabama, was on the pre-clearance list in the Voting Rights Act. I can tell you right now it's unlikely that neither Hank Sanders nor the 125,000 Brooklynites would have been purged had the Supreme Court not gutted the act in 2013. So as I look upon the wreckage that was the New York primary, I see the prelude, the test run for the catastrophic failure, the well-planned failure of the voting system come November. The purges and votes spoiled, in other words, the votes not counted, not the voters, may well elect our next president. So here we go again, or here we keep going. It's not like this is something that is cyclical. I truly do believe, and I mean this from the bottom of my soul, I do believe that the oligarchs that run this country have and continue to eliminate people from the polls who, by virtue of their names or their zip codes, might not vote for the fascists. So they're gone. They're just gone. This happened in Ohio and Florida. It happened here in Georgia. And there's no way to stop it under the present system. No way to stop it at all. I think people who are paying attention to the primary season, because this one has just been a puke fest, hasn't it? I think people who are paying attention to it, most people who are paying attention to it, are surprised to learn, as I was, that when you vote in a primary, you are not voting for the candidate of your choice. You are voting for delegates, some of whom are bound, some of whom are unbound, some of whom are committed, some are not committed, and it's a crapshoot. What that means essentially is that your vote and my vote under the present system can be deemed worthless. Your vote and my vote under the right circumstances can be as effective as a fart in the breeze. In other words, unless you're downwind, nothing. And when Sanders complains about this stuff, the sons of bitches that run Hillary Clinton's neoliberal, neo-fascist campaign, along with Hillary now, scream that Bernie Sanders is going negative because he states categorically the obvious of what's going on, as he did in Arizona. He's going negative. if he talks about Hillary Clinton's multi-million dollar paychecks from all these fucking industries that are destroying the country and some the planet, if he points them out, he's going negative. If he talks about her support of the invasion and the war crimes that occurred in Iraq while he didn't, he's going negative. You see how this works? This works the same way Limbaugh and these right-wing fuckers have been working this country for the past 30 years. You latch on to the big lie, you keep repeating it, and any objection to that big lie is ridiculed as sour grapes, whining, bullshit, it's not true, let's ignore him or her. And up to this point, it has worked.